We are taught to fear the monster under the bed, the stranger in the dark alley, the shadow in the window. But what if the monster is the one who makes your coffee in the morning? What if the monster is the one who tucks your children into bed at night? Chris Watts was the golden boy of Colorado, a loving husband, a devoted father of two beautiful daughters, Bella and Celeste. To the outside world, his life was perfect. But perfection is often just a well-painted cage. And on August 13th, 2018, the beast inside the cage finally broke free. It started with a missed doctor's appointment. Shanann Watts, pregnant with her third child, didn't answer her phone. Her friend, Nicole Atkinson, knew something was wrong. She called the police. When Officer Coonrod arrived at the Watts family home, Chris was the one who opened the door. Watch him closely. This is the first crack in the mask. A normal husband would be frantic. He would be screaming his wife's name. He would be tearing the house apart looking for his babies. But Chris, he was calm. Too calm. He was texting on his phone. He refused to look the officer in the eye. He told them. She said she was going to a friend's house. But inside the house, Shanann's purse was still on the counter. Her medication was still there. And most chilling of all, her phone was found stuffed between the sofa cushions. No mother leaves her children behind. And no pregnant woman disappears without her medication. To understand the horror of this crime, we must understand the lie. Look at these photos. Relationship goals. Best dad ever. Social media painted Chris as the quiet, supportive husband to Shanann's dominant, energetic personality. He was the guy who did whatever he was told. The guy who never raised his voice. Psychologists call this the covert narcissist. They don't demand attention like loud narcissists. Instead, they play the victim. They bottle up their rage for years, hiding behind a smile, until one day, the bottle explodes. Let's freeze this moment. Tuesday, August 14th. The sun is shining on the Watts family home. Chris stands before the news cameras. To the untrained eye, he looks like a worried father. But to a criminal profiler, he is screaming his guilt without saying a word. Look at his arms. They are crossed tightly over his chest. In psychology, we call this blocking. He is literally placing a barrier between himself and the questions. He is protecting his vital organs, a primal instinct when one feels attacked. Now, watch his swaying. He is rocking back and forth on his heels. This is a self-soothing mechanism. Like a child rocking in a corner, his body is trying to release the immense nervous energy of keeping a deadly secret. But the most chilling detail, the duping delight. Watch the corner of his mouth when he says, "I just want them back." It pulls up. For a split second, he smiles. Why? Because he believes he is winning. He believes he is outsmarting the reporters, the police, and the world. He isn't sad, he's exhilarated by his own performance. He thinks he is the main character in a thriller movie, not realizing he is the villain in a horror story. But what turns a boring suburban dad into a family annihilator? Usually there is a catalyst, a trigger that rewires the brain. For Chris Watts, that trigger had a name, Nicole Kessinger. They met at work. She was assertive, independent, and everything Shanann was not. But this wasn't just an affair. It was a metamorphosis. Psychologists describe Chris Watts as a chameleon. He had no true self. When he was with Shanann, he mirrored her desires. Now, with Nicole, he was mirroring hers. He started working out obsessively. He changed his diet. He stopped wearing his wedding ring. Nicole Googled phrases like, "Man, I'm having an affair," with "says he will leave his wife." Chris Googled something far darker. When to say I love you for the first time. And immediately after volcano oil tank explosion. Do you see the terrifying juxtaposition? In one tab, he is researching romance. In the other, he is researching destruction. He wasn't planning a divorce. A divorce implies a past. Chris Watts wanted to be born again. And to be born again, his old life, his pregnant wife and 2 daughters, had to cease to exist. They were no longer people to him. They were dead weight, holding him back from his fantasy. The timeline of horror begins at 1:48 a.m. when Shanann's friend drops her off. We see her on the doorbell camera. She walks up the driveway dragging her suitcase. She looks tired. This is the last time any human being will see her alive, except for her killer. She enters the house. She checks on Bella and Celeste. She changes into a t-shirt. She climbs into bed next to the man she has loved for 8 years. We will never know exactly what words were exchanged in that room, but we know the biology of what happened next. Chris Watts didn't use a weapon. He didn't use a gun. He used his bare hands. He climbed on top of his pregnant wife. He pinned her arms down. Listen to me closely. Strangulation is not quick. It is not like in the movies where someone faints in seconds. It takes minutes. Minutes of struggle. Minutes of looking into someone's eyes. Shanann fought. She scratched his neck. But she was exhausted, emotional, and pregnant. He squeezed until the light left her eyes. He squeezed until the mother of his unborn son, Nico, was gone. And then he sat on the bed. And the door handle turned. Bella, his 4-year-old daughter, walked in. Her little feet pattering on the carpet. She was clutching her blanket. Imagine the scene through her eyes. Her father is sitting on the bed. Her mother is wrapped in a sheet, face down, not moving. "Daddy, what's wrong with Mommy?" she asked. This is the moment where Chris Watts lost his soul. He didn't call 911. He didn't panic. He went into work mode. He told his daughter, "Mommy is sick. We have to take her to the hospital." He dragged his wife's body down the stairs. Think about the physical effort. Thud, thud, thud. He loaded her into the back of his work truck. And then he did the unthinkable. He put Bella and Celeste into the back seat of the same truck. Imagine that drive. 45 minutes to the oil site, Cerv 319. The girls were sitting just inches away from their dead mother's body. Were they crying? Were they asking questions? Or were they silent, sensing the monster sitting in the driver's seat? Chris Watts later said the drive was quiet. He was listening to songs about Battery by Metallica. He was already detaching from reality. They arrived at the oil battery as the sun was beginning to rise. The sky was turning purple and orange. A beautiful backdrop for an act of pure evil. He buried Shanann first. A shallow grave. He was rushed. He was angry. Then he went back to the truck. Celeste was awake. He took her favorite blanket, blue and fuzzy, and he put it over her head. He suffocated his own daughter, but he didn't bury her. He picked up her small, warm body and walked to the oil tanks. These tanks contained crude oil, toxic fumes. He opened the hatch. It was only 8 inches wide. He dropped Celeste inside, and then he walked back for Bella. Bella was older. She was smarter. She saw what happened to CC. She knew. In his prison interview years later, Chris admitted that Bella fought back. She screamed, "Daddy, no." But he didn't stop. He forced her through that 8-inch hatch. Think about that image. A father forcing his own child into a tank of oil. Why? Why the tanks? Psychologists believe this was an act of erasure. He didn't just want them dead. He wanted them dissolved. He wanted them to turn into sludge, into fuel, to be burned away so that no trace of his old life remained. He wanted to wipe the slate clean. But he left one thing behind. The bedsheet, blowing in the wind across the prairie. A silent flag marking the graves of his family. Chris Watts thought he was a genius. But he was walking into a trap set by 2 of the best in the business. Agent Tammy Lee and Agent Graham Coder from the CBI. They utilized a strategy known as the Reed technique, but with a soft twist. They knew Chris was a conflict-avoidant narcissist. If they yelled at him, he would shut down. So they became his friends. They sat close to him. They touched his arm. They spoke softly. They fed his ego. They let him believe he was helping the investigation. Then came the polygraph test. Chris was arrogant enough to think he could beat a machine that measures physiological stress. He failed. Miserably. He scored a -18. When Tammy Lee walked back into the room, the dynamic shifted. She told him, "Chris, you failed. Watch his reaction. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't demand a lawyer. He deflates. The air leaves his body. The nice guy, mask crumbles, and underneath, we see a pathetic, weak man. He asks to speak to his father. And here lies the final insult. Even when confessing, a narcissist cannot take full responsibility. He told his father, "Shanann killed the girls. I caught her doing it, so I killed her." Do you understand the level of malice required for that lie? He tried to frame his murdered wife. He tried to destroy her reputation even after he had destroyed her body. He wanted to be the victim. "I was the hero who avenged my children," he tried to say. But the detectives knew. They knew about the oil tanks. They knew about the affair. And slowly, piece by piece, they forced him to admit the truth. On November 19, 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole. He sits in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin today. His perfect life is gone. His mistress changed her name and vanished. His house was sold. All that remains are the photos on Facebook, smiling faces frozen in time, hiding a horrific truth. This case is not just a story about murder. It is a mirror reflecting the modern condition. We live in an age of curation. We filter our lives. We post the smiles and hide the scars. Shanann Watts posted about a perfect husband while living in a lonely marriage. Chris Watts posted about being a proud dad while fantasizing about freedom. We must learn to look past the pixels. Monsters do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the boy next door. Sometimes they look like the man you sleep next to. To those watching, check on your friends. Not just their Instagram stories, but their souls. Ask the hard questions. Look for the silence behind the noise. Because the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to keep the peace. Don't let perfection be the enemy of truth. I am Silas. And remember, the truth always floats to the surface, eventually.